Okay, and then the last major anatomical concept I want to cover in the basics are cavities. So what we see here with cavities, well, what's the common way you think of cavities? Well, you think like when you go to the dentist, ooh, I have a cavity, I have a hole somewhere. So cavities are like spaces in your body. So when they talk about cavity search, I'm talking about looking at different spaces in the body. But as you can see, there are many different spaces within the body. And this is the OpenStax version, and this is the Martini version over here. So the thing about cavity, like when you think of cavity in terms of like dentistry, you think, okay, it's a hole. Therefore, it's some sort of gap or space. Kind of, sort of. So I think it's more when you use to talk about cavities in anatomy, think of them more like spaces. So it doesn't mean necessarily that means they're hollow and full of air. On the contrary, something occupies the cavities in the human body. So the thing is that cavities are also contained within each other. So they're not mutually exclusive. Organ or a body part is not part, so it won't be like a body part is only part of one cavity and none of the other cavities. There are big cavities, there are smaller sections of other cavities. So you can have a cavity within a cavity within a cavity. So here we have several cavities, and this big one over here is what we call the ventral cavity. And within the ventral cavity, it also contains the thoracic cavity. And hey, remember our thorax and our chest? So again, this is the upper cavity over here. And then there's a sheet of muscle called the diaphragm that separates it from the abdominal pelvic cavity. And this diaphragm, again, it's a sheet of muscle, so it's actually a firm barrier between these two cavities. Now, these cavities also have smaller cavities contained within them. So you can't really see the pleural cavity very well in this picture. Go to the previous OpenStax picture for a better view of that. But you also have the pericardial cavity as well within the thoracic cavity. Now with the abdominal pelvic cavity, you also have the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. So you can have smaller cavities within another cavity within a bigger cavity. So again, I like to think of cavities not as hollow spaces, hollow areas that are full of air, but in anatomy I like to think of them as spaces. So let's use a little analogy. So if you're on campus, where are you? Well, you might be in a UH dorm. And if you're in the UH dorm, well, are you just in the dorm? Are you also in this greater Honolulu metropolitan area? Yes, you are. So you're in the dorm and you're in the greater Honolulu area, right? Are you in the Hawaiian Islands if you're in the UH dorm? Yes, you're in the UH dorm, you're in Honolulu, and you're also in the Hawaiian Islands. Same with like something like the heart. The heart is actually enclosed by, not within the pericardial cavity, but it's surrounded by it. So it's surrounded by the pericardial cavity, and then the pericardial cavity is contained within the thoracic cavity, and the thoracic cavity and the pericardial cavity are also within the ventral cavity. So, is the heart within the thoracic cavity? Yes, it is. Is it within the ventral cavity? Yes, it is. So, an organ, a part can be contained within multiple cavities. Then again, cavities aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes one can contain the other.